Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here with another Master Duel video for you guys. Today we're going to be revisiting an adventure deck that I've been eager to get back to, and that is Adventure Tenyi. So, I'm not still sure yet if I consider this the best adventure deck for best of one ranked ladder in Master Duel. We have certainly started to see some results on Master Duel meta. It's definitely still a little bit too early in the meta this time that I'm recording this, which is the 21st of July, to get a definitive call on what exactly is going to be the best adventure deck. And again, we also have to keep in mind that for our purposes, we are mostly talking about best of one ranked ladder as opposed to tournaments. Now, I've made this distinction before when talking about what the tier list looks like on Master Duel meta, but this meta game in particular, it actually matters a lot more because right now, Adventure Prank Kids is definitely like the highest ranked adventure deck, like far above, I don't know about far, but its power level is about twice the ranking of Adventure Tenyi right now. But the thing is, Adventure Prank Kids is definitely the better choice for a tournament format, regardless of if it's best of 1 or 3, because the deck tends to just be consistent, right? So, in that regard, the Prank Kids build might be best for that format, but is that always the case for ranked ladder, where we do best of 1, you know, kind of endlessly as opposed to in a specific tournament setting? That kind of remains to be seen. So I think next time we do a metagame analysis, we'll definitely be parsing that information in that way a little bit more detailed than we have in the past, but that'll be for a future video. In this case, we are still talking about Adventure Tenyi here, which, yeah, I've been having quite a bit of fun playing, honestly, and learning mostly. This deck has actually been not like challenging to learn, but the variety of combo lines does tend to, more often than not, kind of like, it's kind of, there are very minor variations in certain steps where you can very easily, or at least I can very easily blend them together, right? So, in that regard, I guess it's been a little bit of a hurdle to try to learn some of those plays, but it's not been too bad. I think I'm getting to a place where I'm starting to get more comfortable with the idea of making a combo guide for this deck. I do have some specific lines that are fairly common turn 1 that I could demonstrate in a combo guide, so do look forward to that in the future. I do plan on releasing that. I don't have a specific time frame just yet, but it is in the works, so it'll be sooner rather than later. You can be assured of that. So the build has changed very slightly here. It's only been really a 1-card difference. We took out, I believe we were playing 2 Imperm before. I know the card we added was a 3rd, Tenyi Spirit Vishuda. And again, I'm pretty sure it was the 2nd Imperm that we ended up dropping here. Everything else I'm pretty sure was still in the build before, unless there's like a random one-off hand trap I took out that I'm not remembering. But yeah, we included a 3rd Tenyi Spirit Vishuda because being able to just have the Vishuda for plays is so important in this deck. In Swordsoul Tenyi, we could get away with 2 Vishuda because we had a lot of plays that didn't require specialing a Vishuda. It doesn't have to be specifically a Vishuda, but just having a level 7 non-tuner that you could special summon from the hand is a lot more important to this deck than it is in Swordsoul Tenyi. So that is why initially I was running 2 Vishuda, because I was kind of in the mindset of Swordsoul Tenyi, but then I started playing with this deck more, and then I became, I came to realize, like, oh, you really do often need the extra body, especially for something like Galaxy Tomahawk, which is definitely a combo line I would like to show off, and we'll get to show off a little bit in this video, but of course, that is always the hard part about trying to practice in a Diamond 1 with a new deck, right? Is that more often than not, people will concede if you have like the slightest inclination of going into a combo and they do not have the ways to stop it. So, yeah, I think that's been actually a legitimate hurdle in learning this deck for me, is just not being able to play out the combo lines, right? But the cool thing about this deck is that, like, legit, you can misplay and still win very easily. Like, I've done it quite a bit where, in particular, I'll sometimes forget to bring back the Jet Synchron to pop it with or to tribute it with the Auroradon to summon the O-Lion. Instead, I'll just tribute the Auroradon with like one of the tokens, which sometimes you do that, but, and then that can lead to like a slightly suboptimal board, but it is only slightly, and like I said, it's easy enough to win through it anyway, so. Alright, yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at some of those games, but before we do that, as always, I'm going to go ahead and break down the list card by card here. So, let's jump right into that. We are playing 2 Chiwen, Light of the Zing. We are playing 2 so that we don't, draw 1 and then not be able to combo. Same with O-Lion, in case you're wondering. We're playing 1 Jet Synchron, 1 Tenyi Spirit Adhara, 3 Maxx, 2 Mecha Phantom Lion, 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, 3 Red Rose Dragon, 1 Roxrose Dragon, 2 Water Enchantress of the Temple, 1 Swordsoul of Taia, 1 Swordsoul Strategist Longyuan, 3 Tenyi Spirit Vishuda, 3 Tenyi Spirit Ashuna, 1 Wandering Gryphon Rider, 1 Nibiru the Primal Being, 1 Archnemesis Protos, 1 Foolish Burial, 1 Swordsoul Emergence, 2 Rite of Aramesir, 1 Dracoback the Rideable Dragon, 1 Fateful Adventure, 2 Call by the Grave, 2 Crossout Designator, 1 Basal Rose Shoot, 1 Infinite Permanence, and then finally 1 9 Pillars of the Yang Zing. Down here in the extra deck, we're playing 1 Herald of the Arclight, 1 Denglong First of the Yang Zing, 1 Yazi Evil of the Yang Zing, 1 Baxia Brightness of the Yang Zing, 1 Borreload Savage Dragon, 1 Swordsoul Grandmaster Chi Xiao, 1 Chao Fang Phantom of the Yang Zing, 1 Baron de Fleur, 1 Swordsoul Supreme Sovereign Cheng Ying, 1 number 42 Galaxy Tomahawk, 1 Salman Great Almirage, 1 Monk of the Tenyi, 1 Crystron Halki Fibrax, 1 Barricade Borg Blocker, and then finally 1 Mecha Phantom Auradon. So yeah, this build is like a fairly standard one. I think we're not doing, it's kind of like Swordsoul Tenyi, right? We're not doing anything too adventurous. We're playing the minimum kind of, in this deck you really can't get away, I think, with less than 42 cards. It's a very difficult trimming to do if you want to go down to 40, but we're kind of just playing the bare minimum of what we have to get our plays off to make sure we get them off consistently. So yeah, without further ado, now let's go ahead and jump into some gameplay. It's interesting, I was wondering what kind of deck I was playing against when I actually played this game. It turns out to be a Dark Lucius deck. Yes, as in those random level monsters, a Dark Lucius deck. I mean, for a Dark Lucius deck, it is extremely well put together. I do have to give my opponent that, but in any case, this game will be a good example of how to play through some floodgates and back rows here. So we do get to go second here, and I say get to because we actually have a very good going second hand with the C, the Ash, and the Nibiru. But then our opponent just sets 2 and passes, so it's like, well, cool, okay, I'm glad when we got this really good going second hand, we don't really get to do much with it. I'm going to try to Gryphon Rider in combination with an Ash to do some kind of a play here, but unfortunately my opponent's got a Solemn Strike as one of their back rows, so that is going to stop the Gryphon Rider right in its tracks. I'm just going to have to set the Ash in the Call by and pass here. I do definitely want to set the Ash because I've already got 2 in hand anyway. I didn't have to use one on the first turn, so it's not very likely my opponent's going to have one on, make me use one on their next turn, which they do in fact, or rather they don't in fact do, if that makes any sense. And then yeah, I definitely wanted to get the tuner monster set up on the board so that I could go into a Hulk next turn. As I mentioned in the first Adventure Tenyi video, as long as you can go into a Hulk, like that is the main concern. So I'm going to summon Chiwen and try to go into a Hulk, but my opponent flips up a summon limit. That's definitely really bad, especially given how my hand looks here. But it's not the end of the world by any means. Especially given, again, that my opponent's really not doing too much. This is why, and this is, I've always said this about decks with floodgates, right? And that's that floodgates are scary, but if they don't have another threat on top of the floodgates, then they're really not doing anything at all here, right? That's why Eldritch is so good, not just because of the floodgates, but because you have the recurring Golden Lord to keep bringing back that can, recur itself through all the floodgates that it plays and form a formidable threat on board in addition to shutting the opponent off from doing anything. In our case here, our opponent has not committed anything to the board at all after playing up their floodgates, so I'm just gonna normal summon my other Ash here because they haven't really been doing anything, and I want to add this Dracoback and also still be able to add a Water Enchantress for plays here as well. So now we can equip the Dracoback, we can bounce the summon limit, and then we are finally free to go into Hulk. I'm gonna do it with my with my Ash Blossoms here. It doesn't particularly matter. The most important thing is just having your 3 zones up, right, for the 3 Auradon tokens. Now the opponent is going to droplet here and negate my Hulk, but I'm not super duper concerned about it because, like I said, I added this Water Enchantress in case I needed to special her. I don't really have many other plays because I don't have another Link 3 besides Hulk Auradon that I can go into, and obviously I don't have a machine on board, but I mean, we're still able to generate a decent amount of damage on board, and furthermore, now I can establish a Herald of the Arclight, so now if my opponent tries to flip up the summon limit and mess me up again, or have any kind of a follow-up play, really, basically now I've got an Omni Negate on the board. The summon limit really isn't going to matter much from this point because they're only at 2250, and I can pretty easily just, accrue damage on board just with what I've got, and also the Dracoback bouncing card. So between the Dracoback's bounce and the Herald of Arclight's Omni Negate, I was very, very confident that moving forward we weren't going to have any issues, and sure enough, the opponent concedes as we were able to close out the game there. So I mean, yeah, that game did involve my opponent not really having a threat. That actually goes to show, if you're playing stun, why it is important to make sure you have threats on board whenever possible. Make sure your deck is playing enough threats. But there's a lot of players who have just auto-conceded upon seeing the summon limit being flipped when there's really no need to, especially given, this kind of scenario. So, all right, let's go ahead and take a look at the next game here. All right, so this game is going to be against Sky Strikers, another fairly disruptive deck. My opponent chooses to go first here, which I run into a bafflingly high number of Sky Striker players who choose to go first. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure that's always a going second deck, but I guess also in the way you build it as well. You could build a going first variant, but I think the going second variant is much stronger because you're able to make much more plays than just a Shizuku pass, which is more or less what my opponent's going to do when you're going second. Then you can actually, again, establish a play here. They do have a back row to think about as well. I've got the Imperm, so I'll stop them from adding. Not that, honestly, the game is going to go to their next turn anyway, but, and the cool thing about this deck is, this hand looks really bricky and dead, but, really it's not, because we've got, of course, the Water Enchantress. Really, as long as you've got a way to special summon a monster and you've got a tuner, which, I mean, God knows this deck is playing enough of, then you're good to go here. So this is another reason why I wanted to show this game. My opponent is Snap Ashing to negate the effect to add an equip effect here. But note that Ash, unlike something like Imperm or Veiler, does not negate the card's whole effect for the rest of the turn. It only negates that one activation. So I'm still able to add my Wandering Gryphon Rider, which was the main thing I wanted to do here. I wanted to make sure to point this out so that, if you're playing against adventure decks and you've got an Ash, because I have to assume my opponent was probably more concerned about stopping the Wandering Gryphon Rider than the Dracoback here. So make sure you're paying attention to which effect of Fateful Adventure is being activated if you're playing to Ash and negate it. And that is something that I've been guilty of as well. I'm not going to, pretend like I'm above it or anything, but... So here the opponent's going to Artifact Lancia, which, yeah, that's going to stop me from using, my Tenyi effects, but given that it's turn 2, and I've already got a decent amount of plays established here, including the Basal Rose Shoot, I'm not really too concerned about the Artifact Lancia. Yeah, I can't go into a quote-unquote standard combo, but, I mean, I'm just trying to get 8,000 damage out on board here. That's all I care about, so... Opponent's going to Imperm the Hulk. This is one of the reasons I wanted to go into the Gryphon Rider. I'm also able to keep the Gryphon Rider on board because I decided to use O-Line's effect with the token. So that way I could use Red Rose with the token in order to make the Hulk and keep the Gryphon Rider on board. Now that does mean that I cannot use my O-Line later this turn though, so I do have to keep that in mind when I play here. But that's fine because we're able to go for Jet Synchron, and I can use Jet Synchron to bring it back. That's right, I don't even need it because I've got the Basal Rose Shoot. I end up using that instead of the Jet Synchron to potentially save the Synchron for later. So now I can bring back the Roxrose Dragon, and then I can bring out the O-Lion, and now it doesn't really matter that I used the effect to make a token earlier in the turn, because I've still got more than enough tokens on board, and I've still got the Jet Synchron engraved, and yeah, my opponent concedes. It's not going to be any issue at all for me to find 8,000 damage here. So with one other card left in hand, and it clearly not being a hand trap, the opponent, pretty much, like I said, just has no choice but to concede here. So, cool. All right, let's go and take a look at the next game. All right, so this game is going to be against Prank Kids, and I gotta admit, this is a little bit of bullying here. A little bit of certified bullying of an Adventure Prank Kids. Because as you're about to see, we open with not one but two Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, and anyone who has played with or against Prank Kids extensively, not even extensively, knows just how hard Ash wrecks Prank Kids. So opponent's going to lead with a Dropsies into a very pretty Meow Meow Moo, but given that we open to Ash, we're able to counter, and the opponent does not have the Crossout or the Call By, which is very, very nice here. This is definitely an example of why you need 3 Crossout Designator in Prank Kids, though, because the deck gets hard stopped by a lot of hand traps, including Ash Blossom. I mean, other decks get hard stopped by Ash Blossom too, but not in every combo line, not in the same way that Prank Kids does. So we've got the Water Enchantress, so I'll use the effect for the Rite of Aramesir here. I'm already holding the Adventure. I'm going to use the Chiwen, just normal summon it to add the Dracoback here in order to make sure that I get the Wandering Gryphon Rider, because I really want to hold both the Ash Blossom and the Callbite here. I think it's really important to hold both of those, and I did actually consider normal summoning the Ash here, right, instead of the Chiwen, in order to get the token. That way I could go into a Baron, pop the back row, still bounce the Meow Meow Moo, and do 5,000 as opposed to the 4,000 I would do with the token here, and would leave the back row on board. But it's Prank Kids. They don't really play that many traps, if any at all. So it's like an imperm or a call by at worst, right? And I'm not super concerned about that. So the back row is kind of like whatever. I would much rather value I more highly value the Ash in my hand against this deck. I would much rather hold it than summon it here for the Baron. So I'm just going to normal summon the Chiwen here, and then I'm just going to use that in order to establish the Dracoback search, and then the Gryphon Rider summon, and then of course the Dracoback equip as well. I'll be dealing 1,000 less damage here, but I think that's totally worth it to keep the Ash Blossom in hand. And of course the call by as well. I want the call by too in case my opponent's got like their own Crossout or call by against the Ash Blossom, because we can still use call by to banish the Prank Kid from the graveyard and stop the opponent from comboing off that way. So they do have another Prank Kid. They're going to fansies into a less pretty, oh no, the same Meow Meow Moo, the same pretty one. And yep, I've got the other Ash Blossom. Like I said, this is just certified bullying at this point. Ash Blossom just wrecking Prank Kids left and right like it's nobody's business. And we've already got the means on board to win, so yeah, the opponent's just going to concede right here. We can just bounce their Meow Meow Moo once again and smack him for another 2k from each the token and the Gryphon Rider, which, like I've said before, is another reason, like one of many reasons why the Adventure engine is so good, right? Like, not only does it put out an Omni Negate, but it also puts out 4,000 damage, which is definitely not to be underestimated. Like, it's the reason it's the most prevalent engine in the game right now isn't just because of what it adds to other decks, but the fact that within itself it can make enough plays to take games like this. It's just, it's so very powerful. It's a little ridiculous actually, but in any case, yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at the next game here. All right, so this opponent is playing a Machina deck, but I think this one is going to be more about playing through disruptions. Well, I think I know. This is definitely going to be more about playing through disruptions than floodgates once again. I really wanted to emphasize that because I've seen quite a few people say like, oh, this deck, you know, has a really hard time against floodgates. But in my experience, we're able to play around them with, not always easily, but with relative ease, you know, I think more easily than other combo decks. Okay, so I kind of wanted to explain the sequence and the order of that I'm about to do things here, right? Because I see Ashuna, Adhara, and Longyuan with the Protos, like basically the means to summon the Longyuan. So I'm thinking like, okay, this is a pretty easy Hulk line with the the Ashuna and the Adhara. And I also am very confident that I'm going to be able to establish an Omni Negate, in this case my Baron, before I can fully commit to the combo here. So what I'm thinking here is special the Ashuna, send it for the Monk, special the Adhara, but don't go into Hulk just yet. Then we're going to special the Longyuan. Yes, we are sending Protos, which ideally we would like to have on our end board, but I think establishing the Omni Negate is far more important early on than trying to get a Protos later. I think that would be very greedy to not summon Longyuan just to try to play Protos later. And that's a really easy mindset to fall into. It's one I've fallen into before, right? Where you see the Protos and you're like, oh, I should play this at the end because that's what I normally do. But in a situation like this, like, definitely don't be afraid to use your cards a little bit differently here, your resources. You know, it's important to know how to play when you have few resources, but I feel it's an equally important skill to know how to play when you have an abundance of resources, because sometimes it can just be a little bit overwhelming to try to figure out exactly what to do and in what order to do it in. So I'm going to lead with the Ashuna, I'm then going to link it away for the Monk, and then special the Adhara. That way I have the materials for Hulk ready on the side whenever, but I'm not going to go into Hulk just yet. Like I said, I want to establish the Longyuan first, sending the Protos, and then that way we can get the Baron on board. Now, my opponent actually flips Skill Drain here in response to this summon, which is a smart play. I mean, obviously, if I had summoned Baron first, I would have just negated with the Baron. And again, you know, some people might see this and be like, oh, well, then I'll just, you know, sink into the Qi Xiao, or not the Qi Xiao, the Cheng Ying, I guess, and then just do some damage, whatever. And, I mean, yeah, that would still be a relatively legitimate path to victory, but it doesn't have to be that way. Just because you see a floodgate flipped up, that doesn't mean we're done. We should always look for the out, and this Fateful Adventure is actually going to provide the out to us here. Oh, well, first I am actually going to use the Ashuna effect. That's right, because my initial plan was to actually use Ashuna's effect to summon Vishuda, and then sync with the Vishuda and the Adhara, then use the Vishuda to bounce the skill drain. But actually, it's kind of a good thing my opponent ashed the Ashuna here, because really I should have done, I think anyway, I should have done the Fateful Adventure line first and then tried to Ashuna, but in either case here, the opponent would have ashed the first effect I tried to do anyway, so it actually ended up being better this way because they had ash, but in a vacuum, you know, not assuming your opponent has ash, I think the best way to do it would have been to play the Adventure first here. So yeah, I'm going to use the Adventure, discard the Rose Shoe, get the Water Enchantress, and then establish the Rite of Aramesir here. Now that I've summoned the token with the Adventure already on the board, I can just equip Dracoback straight away and then bounce the skill drain. Don't have to worry about it. Now I can sink into the Baron de Fleur without any trouble here. And that I've got the Destruction and the Omni Negate, plus the damage from the Longyuan, yeah, it's not going to be a problem at all for me to find lethal here. I was going to use Baron, pop one of the back rows, that way I'd only have one on board to worry about, just in case one was like an Imperm or something. That way I either hit the Imperm with the Baron Destruction effect, or if I don't hit it that way, I can hit it with the Negate effect when they try to activate it. And then, of course, like I mentioned earlier, the plan from there was to add Adhara plus Monk into the Hulk. So, actually, yeah, looking back, I'm definitely glad my opponent ashed the Ashuna effect. Again, in a vacuum, assuming they didn't have Ash, which you shouldn't play assuming they have a specific hand trap, I should have played the Fateful Adventure first, but because I played the Ashuna first, it actually ended up working a little bit better in that way. So, alright, let's go and take a look at the next game. Okay, so the last game we're going to watch here is against just a general 40 good cards deck, which is another, like, I think I've mentioned this before, but I'm a little bit intrigued to try a build like that. It would just be for a video, I don't think it'd be anything long term, but I kind of like just good 40 card decks, but they're not really going to get a chance to do anything, to be totally honest. I wanted to show off this duel because I get to show off most of the Tomahawk line, or at least the most important part of it, which is the start. Galaxy Tomahawk is a good card to go into when you can't make a Hulk, but you've got 2 level 7s like this. Oh, and by the way, if you're wondering how to summon Gryphon and Ashuna, you'll do what I did just there, right? Where we start with the Ashuna as Chainlink 1. Because Gryphon Rider is a quick effect, we can actually use it as Chainlink 2. So even though they both have the condition of not having having no monsters on board, we can still actually use both in the same Chainlink because the effect hasn't resolved yet. We don't have monsters on board, so that's how you can summon 2 level 7s. Now we summon the Galaxy Tomahawk here, right? And because we have 5 monster zones, we're gonna make 5 of the Battle Eagle tokens, which is actually a lot more than we need on board. We need the room in order to summon Auroradon. So those of you who might have been wondering why we have Barricade Borg blocker in the deck, this specific line is why. Because we need to go into the blocker and then 2 of the tokens, and that's how we free up 3 monster zones in order to make 3 Mecha Phantom Beast tokens with the Auroradon. So again, this is actually the main reason I wanted to show this game, was this part of the combo line here, to make sure that I established, you know, why we have these seemingly random cards in our extra deck and how they're applied in a practical combo. So yep, now that we have the Auroradon out, we can go for a fairly standard line here. I'm going to sack Auroradon and one of the Battle Eagle tokens, because being level 6, the Battle Eagle tokens are a little bit more awkward to sync with. So we'll still use the last one to synchro with, but oh, and obviously we're going to use Call By on our opponent's Ash Blossom so we can continue the line here. But yeah, so we'll send Auroradon one of the Battle Eagle tokens for the O-Line, which will let us sync for the Danglong. That, of course, is going to get us another token. This is now looking fairly similar to another standard combo, but still with some minor difference. We'll cover that in the combo guide, which again will come out in the relatively near future here. So sending a Vishuda because we already have the Ashuna Engrave. If you didn't have Ashuna Engrave, you'd send that to make the Danglong level 7. Now we can summon the Baron de Fleur here. I'm going to put in the extra monster zone to make sure we have enough room on board, because we can summon Chiwen. Now, okay, so now you see how we were going to sync Chiwen and the level 6 token. We're actually going to get Yazzie and then pop that with the Baron in order to get the Swordsoul of Taia and then continue our plays from there. So At that point, it's a little bit, it becomes, especially if you've played Swordsoul Tenyi, it becomes easier to see where the plays can go from there, right? Like, just from something that's high alone, you can either go into a Chi Xiao plus Protos, you can go into the Baxia for a Chao Feng, just a whole variety of different things that you can do from that point forward. But again, we will cover that combo in more detail in the future in a combo guide. But for now, let's just go ahead and go to the outro. Okay, everybody, that is going to do it for this video. Thank you very much for watching to the very end like this. I greatly appreciate that, personally and also as a means of supporting the channel. Other great ways to support the channel are by commenting and subscribing. Comments, I'm always looking for feedback from you guys, especially for a deck like Adventure Tenyi, where, like, yes, I am starting to get more comfortable with the deck, but it's still very much daunting to try to, like, grasp all the different lines of play. So if at any point you see an alternative line of play that I can make that would have resulted in a better board, definitely let me know. Feel free to jump into the comments with that. I love the constructive criticism, and you guys are really good about giving a good constructive criticism, so I thank you very much for that. And then subscribing is another great way to support the channel. Also lets you know when the videos are dropping, which does happen every single day, so if you subscribe, you will be getting a daily Master Duel video out of me. But that is about all I've got for this one. I would like to very much revisit this deck, and I'll probably ladder with it at least a little bit at the beginning of Season 8 here. But yeah, just let me know if you want to see more. I'm sure you do, because the last Adventure Tenyi video was definitely one of the more popular ones among the new decks that I covered. But anyway, without further ado, this is XLex signing out. Hope you guys have a fantastic day.